now listening to the Arsenal Therapy Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the 15-minute show, part of the Arsenal Therapy Podcast. Today I've got a very special guest on the show in the shape of Will Balsam, who is an academy expert, someone who has a real keen knowledge of Max Dowman, and we're going to talk to him and really pick his brains on Max's development so far, a bit about what he's been doing at the Euros, and a bit about the hype around him and what's to be expected of Max over the next couple of years. Will, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Adam. Happy to be here and talking about one player who I think a lot of people, if they don't know already or have found out about in recent weeks, is definitely going to make some waves, not just at Arsenal over the next few years. Certainly someone who will be well known across the world of soccer very soon.
Absolutely. He is one of the most promising players on the planet. He's someone that I feel like the hype's been accelerated as well. John Terry said about him earlier in the season that he was by far the most talented academy player out there. Declan Rice had a great quote where he said, "You can be the best player in the country at 15. By 18, you're finding a new club." And that's something that's very, very true. We've seen some incredible talents come through at very young ages. I always cast my eye back to Arsenal, showing my age here, but Arturo Lupoli was a goal-scoring phenomenon in 03-04 in the academy structure, never made it. He was someone that had a journeyman career in Italy and just never caught it to the level that was expected of him. Even if you look at players like Bojan as well, another phenomenal talent at youth level, had another, again, good career, but not the level that we expected of him. We expected another Messi. But yeah, let's talk Max. So talk to me a bit about his journey so far, and also give us a bit of insight into you, because you do a lot of work online helping to build people's knowledge up of academy football.
Definitely, yeah. Well, if you don't know, I was formerly HaleEndProductions on Twitter about a year ago. Just changed it to my name. Felt like, I don't know, it was about time. It was kind of one of those where, as you can tell, I'm not from the UK. I'm from the US, and it felt like probably off the rip, nobody's going to necessarily listen to a United States person on their academy thoughts and covering it. But I have always been incredibly invested in Hale End and find it to be fascinating because it is so different than how we do sport over here. It's a bit odd, I feel like, because I think sometimes people turn their nose at maybe doing academy scouting and things like that. But over here in the States, like high school sports and recruiting for college starts at 13 years old. And which is, in my opinion, a little bit young. And I think, as we've seen recently over the last few weeks, there needs to be a protection of players up to a certain age, which kind of perfectly segues to the conversation about Max Dowman, where, what he's doing at his age is super unique in every single way. And the fact that the club has started platforming him even about a year ago, posting about him from not just the Arsenal Academy accounts, but the main accounts and first training and whatnot at 14 years old, that's not normal. And I think the way to look at that and to understand it is they want to dictate the story around him and not let it become one that the media and fans can control, because he's a kid who needs to be protected. He may be the next Messi, he may be the next nothing, but at the very least, he's a human being who needs protecting by the club. And, he's only going to be able to be hidden for so long. And as we kind of saw at the Euros just over the last 2 weeks, the ability to hide him from non-Arsenal fans is now gone, and he's gaining real traction. So, listen, he is a player that I've heard from mostly scouts not at Arsenal that is the biggest prospect we've seen in English academy football in some time, maybe 20 years, and far and away the most talented kid in the country this very moment. And you can just watch him play. He's far and away the most dominant player on the pitch. And not just with the ball at his feet. I think a lot of people are attracted to the highlights that we see of him dribbling, driving past an entire defense, winding up in a goal. But he does work off the ball. He does work defensively. He presses well. He's hungry. And that's kind of what's allowed him to accelerate at such a young age. There's so many young, talented players. But some of them, because they're so much better than their compatriots who are the same age, don't necessarily have the work ethic to continue trying to get better at a faster rate. And since Max has been about 12, 13 years old, he's shown that persistence and want to be not just the best of his age, but ready to play as soon as possible.
Yeah, well, interesting. You said that one of the best talents in the last 20 years, given the talents that have come out even in the last 5-6 years in Foden, Saka, Bellingham, even at Arsenal with Lewis Skelly and Ethan Nwaneri, those talents are absolutely incredible. But the fact that Max is being placed on that pedestal, and as you mentioned, it's not just Arsenal fans saying this stuff now, it's other scouts from other teams, other big accounts, magazines are writing about him. But I think you've made a really great point about Arsenal posting about him. Mikel Arteta's talked about him in his press conference. I believe Declan Rice had a picture of him and Max on his socials at one point. This feels like the club are exposing him to the world, because you mentioned we can only hide him for so long. There is a point where Max is going to have to go out and kind of face the pressure. First year, as we know, with young talents, everyone loves them, everyone backs them, everyone thinks they're wonderful, as Ethan Nwaneri has experienced this season. Second season, you've seen what happened to Kobe Mainoo at Man United. The pressure becomes very, very intense. People don't cuddle you anymore. They want you to perform and they expect a lot. So with Max, there's already a lot of Arsenal fans that he should be starting next season. And I know for a fact those fans have not watched Max play. How do you feel about that? And I guess the expectation that's already grown, because you're someone who actually does watch him. You do a lot of breakdown coverage of him, and you kind of see his strengths and the flaws to his game as well.
Definitely. I mean, it's one of those where you have to kind of remove yourself sometimes from Twitter for a second and think, okay, what percentage of these accounts are run by people Max's age or younger? What percentage of these accounts are run by people who've probably never watched an academy game of any type in their life other than the clips they see on Twitter? Listen, Max is an incredible prospect, and even if he was ready to be the best player in the Premier League, at his age, you don't just throw him into the starting 11. It's not how... Even look at Lamine Yamal. It wasn't just all of a sudden. He's playing week in and week out. Barcelona, the first season he was there, they really controlled his minutes, make sure he wasn't being overexposed, and then he exploded, obviously, for Spain at the Euros this summer. But if you kind of look at how he rose over 18 months, it was a controlled project. Yes, injuries and whatnot sometimes can force a player to play more minutes. Look at Miles Lewis-Skelly this year. I can promise you the plan was not for him to play this many minutes no matter how good he was. We had a little bit of an injury issue at left back. Then an important part of the season came and he was our most trusted left back. Sometimes those situations arise. But if you look at the minutes that Ethan Nwaneri played this season, that was probably the plan. Even with the injuries that had happened, around 1,500 minutes was probably the goal. And that's a lot of minutes. Senior minutes are a completely different ballgame than academy minutes. You'll see, if you follow academy football, you'll have a player play 90 for the under 18s and then the next day be on the bench for the under 21s. It's just a different stress on your muscles between the training, between the physicality of the league and the speed of it. Your muscles take a different type of recuperation and an amount of time that they need to recover from. And, you know, it's so funny because Arsenal fans in the same breath will say Saka has been overplayed his whole career and also be complaining that Ethan hasn't played enough minutes. So
100%.
It's again, I think it really all does relate to the way that even the club is talking about Max. They want the fans to be prepared for him so that it isn't kind of this shock to the system when this 15-year-old plays next year and is undoubtedly going to have some amazing moments. So that they're also prepared that he's going to be a part of the squad, but he's not going to be playing 2,500 minutes next year. If he plays more minutes than Ethan played this year even, I'd be pretty surprised just due to the fact that he'll be 15 until January 1st. So it's a lot of expectation to be prepared for, but there are certain elements of his game that are certainly ready to pounce the second he gets onto the first team's pitch.
Well, just on that, where do you see the bounce coming? Will it be 21s first, or do you think that this is a guy, based on what you've watched, that is ready to make that leap right now?
He'll definitely play some 21s next year, and I think my assumption will be he'll be on the bench in the Premier League before his debut, but I believe his debut will come in our first League Cup match. That's just seems to be a very standard thing that we've seen from Arteta. He did it with Charlie Patino. We know that didn't work out, but just looking at some of the bigger prospects that have come through over the past few years, they've used that competition as kind of a first step, as an ability to gain some confidence, to maybe play against opposition that isn't as strong. And also the pace of the game in those early League Cup matches tends to be a little bit slower just because there isn't as much interest in winning the competition, let's be honest. I'd expect Max to certainly be a key part of the under-21s in the beginning part of the season, but I wouldn't be surprised if by January he's mostly involved in first team the way, Ethan was this year.
Yeah, well, one of the big things is this step up, both physically, as you've mentioned, but also mentally. That's one of the biggest strains, I think, that happens with players. One of the reasons they get a lot more tired in games. It isn't just the actual physical exertion, but the concentration level that's required, knowing where to stand, not just saying, give me the ball so I can beat everyone and score, because the reality is a lot of the players that Max is playing with now aren't going to make it to the Premier League. He is someone that's going to be a star, that's what we hope. But there's a lot of players that are going to end up in the lower leagues or possibly just not playing football beyond the age of 18. I've got friends that did that. Some of them went on and had lower league careers. Some of them just stopped playing after the academy, and they work a normal 9 to 5. And that's just the reality and the harshness of football. Whereas you come into the Premier League, everyone is razor sharp. There's more money in the league than ever before. And that's why the Premier League's top 10 right now are probably 10 of the best teams in Europe. You are looking at, when you look at the Europa League and look at some of the teams that Spurs played, nearly every team in the top 10 in the Prem beats those sides. And that's just the reality of where we're at. So on that, where do you see Max, I guess, his current discipline and that concentration level from academy football and what you've seen of him? You've mentioned that he's very good at press and he works back. He has got that discipline, but what does he need to improve to, I guess, take him into Arteta's thinking for first team football?
Definitely. I honestly say the number one thing, and it's hard to say that he needs to improve on it just strictly because if I were him at this age and the way he's playing, I probably would, deal with the same situations, is he has a little bit of this selfish gene. And by the way, as much as he needs to improve on it, I think it's one of the best parts about his game. He's a player who wants the moment. He wants to take the opportunity. He wants it to be his glory moment. And I think this club, as we all can agree, over the past couple of years, we've kind of been missing a player like that. Not that we don't have players who will do that, but not players who always want that. At times, Max carries the ball for a long lengths of space and probably could release a little bit sooner. Mostly in the Premier League, I'd be worried about injury and just that you don't necessarily see that kind of space without something happening. Whether you earn a foul or not, you hold that ball too long, and oftentimes there will be a tackle coming in. And I'd say the other main thing is, at the moment, Max is super comfortable at kind of receiving in the second phase of build-up and driving from there. He could probably improve his ability to play in the more central areas in terms of breaking the press, but it's all dependent on where he's being asked to play. At the moment, he's been mostly playing kind of right wing, pseudo right wing, mostly kind of drifting in where an attacking midfielder would play. With the way that Arsenal are shaping up for the future, obviously the signing of Zubimendi, it appears they're moving back towards more traditional number 10, who's going to be kind of sitting in behind that striker, who's going to be a bigger part of midfield. And I'd expect Max to need to improve in those areas as well, but it's another one of those things where it's hard to say exactly where he needs to improve because of what he's being asked to do at this level. And I think the under-21s will actually show us a little bit more about where those areas are for Max to improve. His most hidden trait that I feel like I never see scouts or whatever tacticos on Twitter talking about is he is so good at kind of picking off the ball from players who aren't expecting him to be coming. So because he's so far advanced, kind of dropping back into midfield, winning the ball back, and immediately turning into counter-attacking situations, which is a big thing that we're missing currently in the side. So his work off the ball is super impressive to me for somebody of his age who probably doesn't need to be doing that in order to be, earning all the praise that he is.
Yeah, well, we saw that against the Czech side on Sunday night, where he nicked the ball, turned and ran at goal, and he had a shot that just flashed wide of the post. And that was, despite not leading to a goal, was one of the most impressive moments of the game for me, because I just saw a player that was hungry. And you mentioned that we're not doing that at the minute. We have a very big problem in turning high turnovers into shots. And right now, we win the ball so high up the park so often, but what we do with it is a problem. And this is an area where he can very much thrive at Arsenal, because you are getting that ball in the area where he likes to shoot. Same with Ethan Nwaneri. I think it's something that we can utilize him for as well. Just on Ethan, in terms of where he was at this age and where he was maybe a year ago, how do you see Max in relation to the kind of development comparison?
I'd say Ethan maybe had a little bit more of the flair in the final third that we see, right? I think a lot of what Max does that is so spectacular is what happens when the ball's at his feet in terms of carrying and taking players on. Not that he's not an excellent finisher. He is, but what Ethan had at 15 was this innate ability to find little spaces in the final third where he could either create a goal for himself or for a teammate. The ability to play with both feet so well, crosses from the half space, getting to the byline, versatility to play in midfield, out on the wing. He played at a false nine. Ethan was a little bit more of a true attacker in that sense, where I think Max is so good at picking the ball up anywhere that he wants and then kind of going from there, which really does work better at the younger levels. So I do think that could be a little bit of an adjustment period for him, but there's nothing to show that he won't have that ability as well. I think a big part of what he's doing in first team training and being such a part of first team training is learning a lot about that. And the few quotes I've seen from both, you mentioned Mikel and Declan Rice, it does feel that he's learning a little bit more about playing in midfield in those first team training and the physicality of first team training. If you listen or watch or read, which would be a better word, if you read any of the kind of youth reports, I think they call them, on Arsenal.com about players' first experiences in first team training, they all mention what it was like to face that first physicality. One that really comes to mind is Mika Bierith. I'm sure many remember, who's now killing it at Monaco. He said the first time he tried to pin Gabriel in first team training was one of the best learning experiences he's ever had, just in terms of the differential between going up against one of the best center backs, in the world and what it's like playing under 21 football. So to me, I think for Ethan, his game didn't really rely on that so much. He really was more of a pockets player, picking the ball up there and finding little spaces, whereas a lot of what Max does is kind of turning defenders and using little neat touches and an unpredictability to kind of ride contact. So that to me will probably be the biggest difference in their developments. But as highly regarded as Ethan was, as we mentioned off the top, scouts even are more impressed with Max.
And what do you think it is about Max's game that stands out even more than Ethan? Because let's face it, Ethan's been described as a generational talent himself.
It's honestly the Kaká and Zidane in him that you don't really see in the modern game so much anymore. I feel that a lot of the game, and people complain about it all the time, is it's very structured. It's very tight. You're in these spaces. You're doing this exact role. There's not so much freedom. Whereas Max has this kind of controlled freedom that I think Yamal actually is a good comparison to it as well. Someone who has a position, but he doesn't necessarily have to stick to it in order to have the impact that his coach is asking for him. And I think we see that from Max so often where, yes, he's playing as a right winger, but all of a sudden he's created something from the left half space, but it's an overload at the right time. It's kind of that mental ability to have an unpredictability that also fits into the way that the game is being played by the rest of his team. And he's played with so many different players. Like, if you have to think about these groups of youth players at these academies, they mostly been playing with each other every year as they step up. But for the last 3 years, Max has played with basically a different group every year with the under 18s and still kind of found that role for himself, carved that role out for himself where he needs to be, and obviously has the respect of so many players at the academy right now.
Yeah, well, I think it's the fact that he steps up to a different age group every time and still manages to be the star player in every age group. One of the things I like about the 21s is the fact it is attended by a lot of fans, so you are exposed a bit more, whereas 18s games tend to be a bit more closed-doorsy, and it's a lot of kind of football scouts and industry people who are at the games as opposed to the public. But the other thing that I like about 21s is that you will get players coming back from injury that step down, and those players don't like to be embarrassed. So if you're coming up against someone who's strong, physical, 29 years old, and wants to get back playing first team football, you mug them off, they will smash you. They will hit you hard. And I've said many times in the show before, I've seen Ethan Nwaneri and Miles Lewis-Skelly play for the 21s in person a few times. One of those was at Sunderland. They were playing with Bradley Dack in centre midfield, who was 29 at the time, 400 games for Coventry under his belt, and he was someone coming back from injury. Nwaneri was more than comfortable physically in that game, and that's when I realized this kid is special. With Max, one of the things that I noticed a lot with his running is within academy football, the defenders will back off and one man will run with that player a long distance, whereas in first team football, teams get their shape, people get back in, there's a protector, suddenly your run becomes kind of tunneled and you end up getting closed off. How do you think he kind of adapts to deal with that? Or is that just a case of release it quicker and make sure you're keeping the ball moving rather than holding it?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of moments over the last year that make me feel confident that he will have that ability, although he doesn't always need it. A couple that come to mind: the PSG match in the UEFA Youth League. There were a couple times where they felt a little bit more structured, like a little bit closer to under 21s football. Definitely a step up from the under 18s, where Max did beat the first defender, but there was that controller who got back in the space, and Max was able to release the ball forward, kind of play a line-breaking pass. And again, he did a spectacular job of that. I believe it was the first match against Italy in the Euros under 17 a few weeks ago, where he kind of picked the ball up all the way on the right touchline, kind of cut it back in before another player picked him up, and released a perfect overlapping ball to the right back that was perfectly weighted. So, yes, I think there will be some adjustment to that in the senior game. But again, I do think we'll see him in preseason. I think we'll see him with the under-21s, hopefully playing those Papa John's Trophy matches as well, where you're kind of, I think that's what the competition's still called, where you're playing, the under-21s play against like League One and League Two sides, which is always a really good test. And I know at some point today, you and I will probably talk about Andre Anus, who I think came up to that test really well, which exactly as you said, there isn't going to be that space to make those 60-yard runs. Yeah, once in a while in football, you'll see it, but you don't really see it much, obviously, at the senior game. So there will be an adaptation period to that, and I think we've seen it with Ethan. Sometimes we felt that he holds the ball a little bit too long when he gets into those spaces. That's super common. And one of the main reasons I think actually we saw Saka start as left back was there's a little bit more space out there for those types of runs. He was another player who loved to run with the ball at youth levels, picking it up at midfield a lot and getting all the way to goal. But I think learning how to release the ball and get it back, which is a much bigger thing in senior football than it is in youth football, will help teach him that.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Saka at left back. That's something that was very common back in the day. Arsene Wenger, Sir Alex, they would bring players in wide areas. We have seen that with Ethan this year. One of the things that is also very common is them playing a run of games and being pulled back out. One of the things I've often wondered is how much video analysis there is at youth level. So within Premier League football, we know that those players sit much hours of footage of the opponents. They watch clip after clip of weaknesses. Everything is analyzed to micro details, even by fans now, whereas at academy level, it's not. So there is that thing of players get found out quite quickly. Max, the thing that I think people will know is that he overplays, but that's kind of because he's the best player there. He will grab responsibility. He will show off. And even watching England in the under-17s, it's a team filled with individuals. There is no cohesion in that team. Everyone wants to go forward and everyone wants to show how good they are. It's painful watching them at times, especially the Italy game. But Belgium was okay. The Chechnya game, it was okay. They were bad. England were good. It was one of those where you look at it and you think Max was quite clearly the best player in that team, despite being a couple of years younger than most. But so he is reported to be going on the Asia tour. I guess what do you want to see from him on that tour that you either have seen and really liked at youth level, or you think that you've seen it at youth level and think he could be exposed, so he needs to work on it?
Yeah, the main thing that I wouldn't say worry about, but thing that you can kind of lose when you take that step up sometimes is the unpredictability. The thing that really makes Max special is you don't know where the next touch is going. You don't know when it's getting released. And, as much as we talked about him releasing the ball sooner, I think the fact that he does sometimes carry for so long can be shocking because he is hard to win the ball off of. So keeping that confidence of feeling like he can still make those decisions, making the right decisions, backing himself will be the biggest thing. And from what I know about him and the people I've spoken to, that shouldn't be of any concern. And, we've seen with Miles this year. Yeah, once in a while he's gotten himself into tough situations, but I think we'd all agree we'd like him to continue playing exactly the way he is, with that kind of cockiness and confidence on the ball, which is impossible to teach and you never would want to remove from someone's game. The biggest thing that I'm kind of intrigued to see is, will Max be incorporated originally from wide areas the way we've seen with Ethan, even with Miles we've seen? These are two players who mostly spent their youth in central areas. Obviously, for years we've seen it in the Premier League. Is Max of the level, or does Arteta feel that he's of the level to potentially start in a more central area? Will he get opportunity to play as kind of that attacking midfield role? Because I do think it eliminates some of his best qualities to force him out wide. And if you watch a lot of him, very rarely do his best actions come in the final third when he's either on the edge of the box or outside of the edge of the box. So as much as Ethan is even at his best in those central areas, he was so much a half spaces player and a wide player. Even if he was playing as a number 10 or as a false 9, he loved to drift wide and pick the ball up there. I think when Max is playing as a right winger, it's not really as a right winger. He's always kind of coming into the center of the park, always making something happen in front of net. So that will be something to definitely watch out for in preseason, and then how he gets incorporated into the under-21s at the beginning of next year.
Yeah, well, what's interesting about Max as well is the way he carries the ball. It's very, very protected at all times. It's like that ball is on a shoestring. It's literally under his spell the whole way wherever he goes. But there's a couple of questions that I've often wondered about Max. First is, how quick is he? Because he carries long, long distances, but I haven't seen enough of him running into big spaces, which that becomes a requirement in the Prem. We've seen it with Nwaneri, for example, especially if you're playing wide. And then the other thing is that physicality, because he's strong for his age. He's very well built for a 15-year-old. He's much bigger than most 15-year-olds, but he's also much smaller than most Premier League players. So how do you see that, I guess, bulkiness, and the other thing, the pace? Because firstly, that's a question. I'm not sure how quick he is. What do you think on that? And then how do you think the physical side, literally the contact, will fare up for him?
Yeah, to me, I don't think he's ever going to be the fastest player on the pitch without the ball, which I think we talk about speed a lot. Like if you think about a Theo Walcott, like there was no doubt no one was faster than him running in a straight line without the ball. That's just what made him the paciest player out there. Max has a certain quickness to the way the ball touches his foot one after another. So it's very hard to predict and get in his way when he's got the ball at his feet. He's not going to make a run in behind faster than, any left back or right back that he goes up against. But that ability to kind of, as a defender is running with you or backwards to try and stop you, his ability to, think Arjen Robben, in the fact that he never lost any pace as he kept going. In ways it almost felt like he was revving up the whole way until he released the ball. So I think for Max, that's the biggest thing in terms of pace. And then the physicality. It is interesting because usually, the biggest thing when people talked about Cheeto Obi was he's 6'5". That's why he's able to be so dominant against. But Max is 15 and he's like 6'2" already. He's so big for his age, but he's playing ages up. So I don't worry about. He doesn't look that much bigger than other players on the pitch. He does this thing with his left arm that I don't know if people can see, kind of holds it out almost like extended without making contact. It makes his body a lot bigger, kind of to defend, because you kind of can't get around him on one side, and that's the side he's carrying the ball on. So he's somehow learned how to do that and protect himself from overly physical players. We haven't seen him go up against some of the biggest, youth players quite yet. Even in the under-17s, that's not quite, it's pretty much the same level he's playing at the under-18. So it's hard to say for sure, but the way that he does protect the ball right now, I don't have huge physical worries.
Well, just on that, in the Belgium game, the opening game of the group stages, he was up against the Cat, who is a big player, and he shook him off at one point. I think you had a video of it, shakes him off very, very easily, runs through, plays it in for someone, and he should have scored. And that to me was a big sign, because the Cat is a big, big boy. He's one of those. I was talking to Ben Matheson about this, and I find him very difficult to watch because he is such what I would describe as an unconventional midfielder. He's big, he's bulky, he's got pretty bad posture, but he always seems to get the ball to where he needs to. And it was really interesting to see Max just shake him off with such ease. And interestingly, you say about the use of the arm. Lewis Skelly and Ethan Nwaneri, by contrast, are very good at getting very low to the ball, but they are both very good at using their arms. So especially Lewis Skelly, he rides the contact very well. He gets down low and then he kind of springs back up. Yeah. And again, that arm is there to protect him from the defender. But yeah, Max's height, that is something that I don't think is discussed a lot. He is a very, very tall player. You mentioned Kaká, Zidane. Kaká, by contrast, was very, very quick. Zidane wasn't, but he was no slouch either. And Zidane was a strong player who could carry with ease through the middle and was similarly around 6'2". So how do you see that benefiting him? And is there any worries that he keeps shooting up in the way that Kai Havertz did, and the game has to change as a result of kind of his physique changing?
Yeah, I mean, I see people always saying that I hope he doesn't grow more. I think that's such a player by player, body by body basis. It's hard to make those judgments, and you don't actually really see it much in scouting in terms of like, oh, we like this player, but we're worried he's going to grow more. You don't really hear scouts talk about it in that way. So it's not something that I weigh too heavily. Yes, if he grows 3 more inches, which would be insane, I guess there's some level of concern that's there, but I try not to think about that. It's a player who also at this age, like, he's been growing his whole life and consistently gotten better, right? Like we all have. We all adjust to our bodies. There may be little periods or whatever, and I think that's weighted so heavily on the Kai Havertz scale that I'm not sure people necessarily watched him that much when he was younger and then kind of make this judgment that he grew and it became a bigger thing. In terms of the height and the way that, it affects his play, I actually think with him, contrary to Miles Lewis Skelly very much uses that arm in kind of a bent shape to kind of keep that lowness to him that allows him to kind of, it almost feels like he's on the ground and also running by people at the same time. Whereas Max kind of uses it to make himself bigger, which is, to me, that makes me another reason I'm not too concerned about the height. The way he puts that arm out, it's hard for a player to try and get close because he's gotten so big. But the fact that he still is able to create bursts from that position is what makes him so hard to stop.
Yeah, so just finally to wrap up, do you think he is ready to kind of get stuck in the Asia Tour and really show that he is ready to play at the next level?
100%. I'm very excited. I mean, think about what we saw, think about Saladin Uladamhand, who I'm sure people have kind of forgotten about over the course of the year, but it's a player who had some senior experience in the second division in the Netherlands, had a really nice preseason tour with us, looked ready for the physical level in preseason. It's a little bit slower, obviously, because it's preseason, and I think it'll be a great time for Max to show what he can do and give him some confidence going into the year. And again, I expect him to have involvement with the first team next year, but it's going to be very carefully guarded. So it could be 300 minutes. It could be 1,500 minutes. It could be 2,000 minutes. I mean, it's one of the hardest things to predict because it will be very much week by week. They're going to protect this player at 15 years old the way that they should and not be worried about the fans saying he could start in the Champions League semifinal. But I do expect the preseason tour to be a lot of fun. And again, everybody hopefully can do better than they have this year with Ethan and the way that they react and complaining he's not getting enough minutes. These are extraordinarily... Think about what you were like when you were 15 and then just go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's not just fans saying that. There are former players. I did have a Twitter debate about it with Jay Bothroyd yesterday, and he ended up saying, "You've never played the game. Ethan should have played more." So we will leave it there. Will, please tell everyone where they can find you. It's been a big pleasure having you on the show and kind of picking your brain for this knowledge that you've got.
Definitely. You can find me on Twitter at my name right there, Will Balsam, as well as YouTube and TikTok. I think the handles are still HaleEndProductions. TikTok mostly doing video highlights with analysis, and then YouTube some larger like U21 and under 18 recaps and loan coverage stuff. But if you want Academy football, all the stuff, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok, it's all there.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you for watching. Please hit the like and subscribe button, and we will back you again with Will for another Academy show very soon. Have a great day.